We read in the scroll of Ruth that Elimelech and his family left Bethlehem during a drought and sojourned east of Israel in the land of Moab. The Moabites were worshippers of the pagan god of prosperity, Chemosh. It was the same cast iron, pot-bellied god that their kindred the Ammonites worshipped by the name of Molech. They both wore the Phrygian cap, the official headwear of both Tammuz in Babylon and later Mithra in Rome. At the time of the winter solstice, December 25th on the ancient calendar, they had a public child mass, mass meaning sacrifice. The priests stoked the iron image of the enthroned Chemosh with wood and burning pitch, turning their pot-bellied god into a cherry red furnace. The people made long lists of their desires and recited them to the god of prosperity just before they put their infant children into the red-hot lap of their god with his Phrygian cap. As the babies were incinerated in the December 25th child mass, the people were assured that their sacrifice would be rewarded in the coming year. On the same day, south of Israel, the Egyptians worshiped their sun god, Ra. An Egyptian hieroglyph depicts Ra castrating himself, just as Greek legend tells of the god Attis performing the same surgery on himself. Worshippers of Ra would hang gold and silver balls on an upright palm tree, as Jeremiah reports it, and place their decorated gifts to the sun god under the tree decorated with the gold and silver testicles of Ra. This vain custom was performed on Ra's birthday, December 25th. When Israel adopted this custom, they used the evergreen tree, which they cut out of the forest with an axe and erected it in their homes with the help of a hammer and nails so that it would not topple over, and decked it with gold and silver balls. God calls this festival an abomination. In the 1600s, it was illegal to have a Christmas tree or even a Christmas service in America. The Pilgrims knew that it was pure pagan sun god worship. Now, don't be offended because I'm telling you these things. Be offended because these abominations have gone unchallenged by modern paganized Christianity. These occult practices have changed very little since being brought into America. A month before the birthday of Tammuz, we have our children make endless lists to the cherry-red, pot-bellied god of prosperity, and then we place our terrified children into the lap of this god who sits on his throne in the shopping mall wearing his Phrygian cap. On Christmas Eve, he will come down the fireplace chimney and deliver gifts under the evergreen tree decorated with gold and silver balls. Our children will kneel before the evergreen phallic symbol as they receive the blessings from their God. And parents charge their credit cards to the limit to make certain that their children are not disappointed when their God makes good on his promise of prosperity. Months before the event, the world shifts into high gear to promise the most fulfilling experience of life when our children open boxes filled with their greatest hopes and dreams. More stuff. The reality is never as great as the carrot dangled before our nose. Traditions. Traditions can blind us from the truth and cause us to wander in the myopic fog of man-made religious systems for an entire lifetime. Many of the traditions of the Western Gentile Christian Church are merely adapted pagan sun god worship rituals inherited from our ancestors. They were forced to compromise with the Roman Emperor Constantine or lose their life for refusing to bow. Most of these traditions were imported directly from Babylon. In fact, there's not a single religion practiced upon the face of the earth today that has not been polluted by Nimrod's rebellion against the one true God. I'm Michael Rood. Prepare for a rude awakening. How many wise men came to present gifts to Jesus? Where did they find him, and how was he dressed?
There were 3 wise men. He was lying in a manger, and I believe he was in swaddling clothes.
I believe there were 3 wise men.
Of course, 3. 3? Yes, 3.
The way I understand, it was 3 wise men who came to visit Jesus. He was found in a manger.
In a manger.
In a manger.
And I believe he was wearing swaddling cloths.
In swaddling clothes.
Actually, he was dressed in a swaddling clothes.
In swaddling clothes.
Ask the man or woman on the street, how many wise men came to present gifts to Jesus? Where did they find him, and how was he dressed? As you can see, the common answer is 3 wise men found the newborn babe wrapped in swaddling clothes lying in a manger. That, however, is not the testimony of the Scriptures. We read in the King James Version of Matthew's account that an undesignated number of wise men, in the Greek magi, came to the house where they found the young child, Joshua, living with his mother Miriam and Joseph. In the Gospel of Luke, we read that only the shepherds arrived at the manger. Sorry for this rude interruption, but Joshua was actually born on the first day of the Feast of Tabernacles, the 15th day of the 7th month on the biblical calendar, which always occurs in autumn, not December 25th when the pagan sun gods were said to be born. His birth was an intermediate fulfillment of the Feast of Sukkot, or mangers. It is the same word in the Hebrew language. Joseph was required to live in a sukkah or tabernacle during the entire 7-day feast. Miriam, his pregnant wife, was not required to live in the sukkah, but the Bethlehem bed and breakfast was completely booked. So she joined her husband in the sukkah on the first day of the Feast of Sukkot and delivered her firstborn son in the sukkah. That is the moment when the Word was made flesh and Sukkoted, or tabernacled. In the King James Version, dwelt among us. The astronomers watched the skies for more than 500 years, searching for the great sign in the heavens that finally occurred on Tishri 1, at the end of the 4th millennium. The constellation Betula, the Virgin, clothed with the setting sun, the first sliver of the new moon beneath her feet. And in the 12 stars above her head, the planet Hatzadik, the righteous, came into conjunction with the star Hamelech, the king, in the constellation of Ariel, the Lion of Judah. On the first day of the month of Tishri, on Yom Teruah, the Day of Trumpets, this one-time celestial alignment announced the upcoming birth of the Melech Tzaddik, the righteous King of Kings, the Lion of the tribe of Judah. Truth is always more exciting than fictitious traditions and fairy tales based on ignorance of the Scriptures. Leave your Western Gentile mentality behind as we explore the Bible from a Jewish or Hebrew perspective. This is the paradigm shift for which you have been waiting an entire lifetime. In the book of Ezekiel, he wrote, "The angel brought me to the gate of the house of the Lord, and I beheld women weeping for Tammuz. Then said he unto me, Thou shalt see greater abominations. And he brought me into the inner court, where about 25 men had their back toward the temple, and they faced the east and worshipped the sun." Sun worship and the worship of Tammuz started in ancient Babylon. Nimrod built a city that was the center of his world government, in which he was proclaimed God. His kingdom bore totalitarian rule over the people, reducing men to slaves in his political, economic, and religious system. According to ancient Jewish writings, Nimrod was slain by Noah's son Shem, and his body parts were scattered throughout the land of Shinar. Nimrod's devoted followers erected a tower that reached into the heavens, a huge obelisk like we see here in Caesarea, and in Washington, D.C., Heliopolis, Egypt, Rome, London, Paris, and New York City. This phallic symbol is the image of the uncircumcised penis of Nimrod, the father of Babylonian sun god worship. The Creator calls this the image of jealousy and an abomination. This Roman-created abomination, found recently in its proper state, toppled over and in pieces, was rebuilt in the summer of 2001. In the month of its completion, a gay pride parade was held in Tel Aviv, a befitting inauguration for this obelisk re-erection, and in the month of Tammuz, no less. Nimrod's widow Beltus, also known as Semiramis, not willing to let the kingdom slip through her fingers when her husband was killed, proclaimed that Nimrod had ascended into the heavens, was now the sun god, and that he had impregnated her with the rays of the sun. At least that was her story. Her child was born on the winter solstice on the ancient calendar, December 25th. Forevermore, this day would be celebrated as the day that Nimrod, the sun god, was reborn as Tammuz. The birth date of the Babylonian sun god is a shock to some in the West, but common knowledge among Jewish scholars and historians. Israel was taken captive into Babylon for their disobedience concerning sun god worship. We had also been captives in Egypt, where we took on the worship of Ra, the Egyptian sun god, who was born on December 25th. In 168 BC, the Syrian Greek general Antiochus Epiphanes occupied Jerusalem and set up a statue of Zeus in the temple on Zeus's birthday, and proclaimed that Zeus was God on December 25th. And when Rome conquered Jerusalem, they hung Jewish patriots on the cross of Mithra as a sacrifice to the Roman sun god who was born on, you guessed it, December 25th. The confusion of languages at the Tower of Babel scattered the heathen into the far corners of the earth and confused the names of their gods. But the worship rituals remain much the same throughout the earth. There is one date that I assure you Yahshua of Nazareth was not born, December 25th. But who was? Little baby Tammuz. Tammuz, so the story goes, was gored to death by a wild boar in a hunting accident when he was 40 years old. The 40 days of weeping for Tammuz was instituted, one day for each year of his life, in which sun god worshippers would deny themselves a pleasure in this life for the sake of Tammuz's pleasure in the afterlife. When Tammuz's mother died many years later, the exalted Queen of Heaven was sent back to earth by the gods on the first Sunday after the vernal equinox. Nimrod's wife arrived in a giant egg which landed in the Euphrates River and broke open to allow her to emerge, reincarnated as the bare-breasted goddess of sexual desire, Easter. To proclaim her divinity, Easter changed a bird into an egg-laying rabbit. In this dingy Hinnom Valley Tammuz cave, the occult priest would impregnate virgins on the altar of Easter at the Easter sunrise service, and a year later they sacrificed those 3-month-old infants on the same altar and dyed Easter eggs in the blood of those sacrificed babies. To this day, one Christian denomination only allows their Easter eggs to be dyed a single specific color, blood red. They have no idea how the tradition started or what it rehearses. But now you know. Easter Sunday is now the day that culminates the 40 days of weeping for Tammuz, called by many Lent. On this day, entire denominations continue a tradition of slaughtering the wild boar that killed Tammuz and eating ham on Easter Sunday. There is one date that I assure you Yahshua did not rise from the grave, Easter Sunday. Frequently, Easter and Passover are an entire month apart. Why? They represent the worship of two different gods. Easter is celebrated according to a pagan sun god calendar. Passover is celebrated according to the observance of the biblical new moon and the ripening of the barley in the land of Israel. Yahshua kept the feast of Passover. All of the rehearsals that were embedded in that feast were fulfilled the year of his death and resurrection. He was the final Passover sacrifice. His sinless blood paid the price for our redemption. On the other hand, Easter is a rehearsal of child sacrifice and fertility rites of pagan sun god worshippers. Which celebration should you keep? That depends on which god you serve. It's your choice. But now you understand why the Holy One instructs us. Do not learn the way of the heathen and how they worship their gods and then do the same to me. It is an abomination. Christmas and Easter are not the celebrations of the birth and resurrection of Yahshua of Nazareth, but the watered-down continuation of child sacrifice festivals that were hatched in Babylon 2,000 years before his birth. We all recognize that the pagan calendar, which has been adopted by the Christian world, names every day of the week and nearly every month of the year after a pagan god or fallen angel. But many are surprised to see that the fourth month on the modern Jewish calendar is named after the pagan god Tammuz. In direct violation of the Torah, thou shalt not allow the names of other gods to come out of your mouth. I only speak the names of pagan gods for the same reasons that the prophets of Israel spoke their names, to expose the sick, twisted traditions that we have inherited from our disobedient ancestors. Religious schemes have been fabricated by the mind of man that have nothing to do with how God desires to be worshipped. Pop Christian culture adorns itself with the latest hip Jesus apparel and jewelry that asked, WWJD, what would Jesus do? But seldom opens the scriptures to find out. Yahshua found the place where it was written, said what was written, and did what was written. He did not make up his own theology as he went along. He always obeyed the Torah and said that the Father seeks those who would worship him in spirit and in the truth that was written in stone over 3,400 years ago. When we are ignorant of his instructions, we naturally slip back into Babylonian sun god worship, while we say we are doing it for him. Israel expressed the same ignorance of God's ways when we built a golden calf and said, tomorrow is a feast to Yahweh. He was absolutely furious. He wanted to incinerate us all. Occasionally I hear the emotionally charged defense, that is not what Christmas and Easter mean to me. But I don't care what they mean to you. I don't worship you. The Almighty says that it is an abomination to him. Just as the Almighty told Abraham in Genesis, he tells those living at the end of the age in the book of Revelation, come out of Babylon.
Now Babylon was such a superpower in its day. The ruins of its capital city are in modern Iraq, and the grandeur of ancient Babylon can be seen from this replica of the Ishtar Gate, which is at the entrance of the ruins of the ancient city of Babylon.
Yeah!